beautiful beings. Before we get started with today's story, I just wanted to say thank you for the overwhelming support and love you guys have shown me, and thank you for joining me on my journey. Also, I want to thank today's video sponsor, Tubby Energy. Today's video is brought to you by Tubby Energy, the ultimate energy drink designed for gamers, creators, and anyone who needs a boost without the crash. Unlike those other energy drinks loaded with sugar and junk, Tubby is packed with clean ingredients to fuel your focus, energy, and performance all day long. Whether you're grinding through a gaming session or just need that extra push to get through your day, Tubby's got you covered. And the best part, it's jitter-free. No weird crashes, just clean, sustained energy. Check out the link in the description below and use my code WETT at checkout to save 20% off your order. Yes, that's right. Not 10, but a whopping 20% off. Power up with Tubby Energy and stay on top of your game. A huge thank you to Tubby for sponsoring this video. Alright, let's dive into today's video. I haven't got much time. They're at my door and have started trying to get in. My name is Luke Jacobs. I am of sound mind and not depressed. If I end up missing or dead, it is not from my own doing. I saw something I wasn't supposed to see, and now they are here to try and silence me. I have been noting down over the last few days what I experienced in hope for some answers. The following events are based on what I can remember. I am a keen hiker, rock climber, and cave explorer. I live on the outskirts of a vast national park, which is ideal for all three. On my previous hike, I followed a short, steep trail that looped through a section of the forest. The walk took about 2 hours in total. Near the end of the route, I noticed a small, dark opening within the rock formation. It was around 60 yards away from the main trail. I curiously wandered over to take a look inside. It appeared to be quite a standard cave for the area. I took out my flashlight and inspected it for a moment. Emerging from the shadowy right-hand corner was a small, narrow crevice. It was an opening to a new cave system below. Unfortunately, I didn't have any of my caving gear with me, and it was getting late in the day, so I left and made my way home. I had the full intention of going back the next day to check it out. The next morning, around 5 a.m, I packed up my gear and drove over to a clearing in the forest. I had told my brother Sam the night before where I was going and what time I would be expected back. I did this as a routine whenever I went out hiking or caving, just in case the worst happened. I pulled up on the edge of the forest and made my way up the trail. I was excited to explore somewhere new. I had never noticed this cave before, even though I had frequently hiked the track over the years. The fact that there was a further cave system below was something I was excited to explore. The mudded trail was soft from the morning dew under my feet as I neared the cave. I turned off the main trail and waded through overgrown grass and bushes. My eager pace slowed. I looked with suspicion at the cave entrance. It had been loosely covered by branches and foliage. I moved the various branches and vines away and switched my flashlight on. I lit up the opening, making sure someone wasn't using it as a temporary shelter. It was empty. Though strange, I thought possibly another hiker had found this gem of a spot and wanted to make sure no one else got there before them. As I crouched and gradually made my way inside, I could hear faint dripping noises as condensation above fell around me. I stood on the edge of the narrow crevice. I peered over the lip and looked intently into the darkness. My flashlight revealed a massive cavity underneath, about 70 to 80 foot below. I prepared my harness, got bolted up to the cave wall. As I made sure everything was secure, I heard something echoing up from below. It sounded like inaudible shouting or screaming, but it could have easily been water or wind reverberating off the walls. It's amazing how far sound travels in enclosed places. I switched from the flashlight to my headlamp and began to make my descent. As I eased my way down, the bottom seemed brighter than I would expect. As my feet touched the floor, I gazed back up at the sunlit gap above. I unhooked myself from the tether and switched back to my flashlight. I looked back and forth. It looked more like a large tunnel than an enclosed cavity. The normally uneven ground was unusually flat and void. I noticed that the concave walls were all lined with dim lantern-style lights. This only intrigued me further. I wandered forwards cautiously until I was going around a slight bend. Again, I was hit with echoey shouts and screams. Now, I was sure they were definitely people. They weren't the kind of shouting you would expect from construction workers or an exploration party. No, it sounded much more sinister. My pure adventurous excitement was in that moment replaced by an unsettling feeling of dread. I looked at my cell phone. I knew it had no signal, but it was a nervous habit I had when I felt alone. After about 5 minutes of walking, my flashlight beam hit a jagged wall up ahead. The lights on either side of me meandered round as I came to a T-shape. I looked from left to right, both led into darkness. As the wall-lined lights faded into the distance, a wave of petrified screams swept over me from the left. I swung my body over and scanned the area. On the gritted rock and limestone dust below, I could see thin tire tracks. I regrettably decided to follow the cries, but I just thought that a team of people had got into trouble down here. But I couldn't have been more wrong, as the more I stepped, the louder and more violent the cries became. I reached a sharp corner. I switched my flashlight off and peered nervously round. The narrow tunnel opened out into a massive lit cavern. I gasped, my face contorted in horror at the scene unfolding in front of me. 4 large floodlights exposed dozens of metal bar cages, each one housing 10 to 12 men, women and children. Shockingly, they were being guarded by our own military personnel. Fully armed guards patrolled around the cages. Many of the helpless people inside were hysterically crying and comforting each other. Some just looked shell-shocked, staring straight ahead into nothing. Most wore dirt-stained and ripped clothing, with many looking in poor health. My eyes darted upwards as a red light flashed on the cave ceiling. Everyone then slowly looked up as a siren droned out of a small loudspeaker placed in one of the corners. It was quickly accompanied by a mass of people gasping. Then the screaming continued. A deep rumbling sound then came from the far end of the cave, like something heavy being scraped along the floor. 4 of the military guards then started pushing a cage full of people towards a dark point on the far side. It seemed to be a slope into another part of the cave. The trapped occupants started to pray and plead with the enforcers to stop, but it fell on deaf ears. The shrieking cries of help filled the air. Distress was visible in the onlookers' faces. They all slipped away into the darkness. A few moments of silence then pursued. Heavy, fast-paced footsteps began to echo out from the dark as the 4 military personnel came sprinting out of the shadows. What followed were horrific screams from the doomed captives. It was preceded by harsh sounds of metal twisting and snapping. The screams soon faded and were replaced by snarling noises and what I can only describe as ripping flesh. Then crash! The mangled cage suddenly came flying from the abyss. It was now blood-stained and empty. As the cloud of dust settled around it, mass hysteria erupted. The low rumbling noise sounded out once more as the ground vibrated. I couldn't believe what I had seen. These were our military, dehumanizing people, leading them to their certain death, feeding them to to whatever them things were down there. I had to get some evidence, as no one would believe me. I took out my cell, hands shaking in fear and shock. I tried to take a photo. A bolt of light flashed around me. Shit. I had forgotten to take the flash off before taking it. Several guards then looked in my direction. They raised their rifles towards me. I turned to run, dust kicking up, as a commotion ensued behind. As I ran, the lights began to get brighter until the whole tunneling cave was engulfed in light. I ran faster and faster. The sound of various hooks and clips on my harness resonated around me. My short, shallow breaths echoed off the limestone walls as I nearly missed the turn from where I entered. I skidded round the corner, catching my hand on a jagged rock. I winced in pain, but adrenaline kept me moving. I reached the cord and quickly clipped myself in. My blood-covered hands slipped as I tried to hoist myself up. I gained momentum and started to see daylight streaming through the rock opening. I could hear shouting and footsteps from the depths below. Someone yelled, "He went this way," while a second voice went, "Now, cut them." It then went pitch black below me. They had turned the lights off. A second before, I grasped onto the rocks above. I strained and squeezed myself out of the tight space, blood slowly running down my arm. My legs scrambled over the ledge, just as beams of light flooded the space underneath. I held my breath as one of the soldiers shouted out, "Clear." I exhaled while slumping to the floor, trying to make sense of the last hour. Before I could compose myself, a voice barked out, "Up, up, up!" I jolted to my feet as 6 bright red lasers streamed through the dusty opening, hitting the wall above. I stumbled frantically out of the cave. I didn't stop running until I had reached my car. I grabbed the first aid kit from my bag and wrapped a bandage around the blooded gash on my hand. I called my brother while driving home. I told him what happened. He, of course, didn't believe me. Sam said to stop winding him up. He was busy and hung up the phone. I got home and tended to my wounds. Luckily, it looked worse than it was. I tossed and turned all night thinking about those poor people. Many of them looked like they were just picked off the streets. The next morning, Sam came to mine. I showed him my hand, told him every detail, and of course the photo I took. Finally, he began to see I was telling the truth. He said that I had to show him. I, of course, was hesitant. I explained that there was military running it, and they had seen me take a photo. Sam then came up with an idea. We would park up nearby and use his drone to check it out. I agreed. We drove over and pulled up on the side of the road. A lump formed in the back of my throat as Sam set up the drone. I directed him on where the cave was located. We both anxiously looked at his tablet, which was streaming the drone footage. I saw the overgrown patch outside the cave. I gestured for Sam to turn towards the cave opening. I muttered in disbelief, "What?" The cave opening was now replaced by loose rocks and rubble. The whole rock face appeared to have caved in. The camera footage then swerved and fell in towards the ground. The screen went black. Then, signal lost. Something had happened to the drone. We both scrambled back into the car and I drove home, dropping Sam off on the way. As the night set in, I noticed a black saloon car parked across the street from my house. It looked to occupy 2 people, both wearing suits. I studied it through my blinds, thinking to myself, what were they doing there? They were just sat staring forwards. Then out of nowhere, they both turned towards me. I recoiled back, the blind slats snapping shut, just as I heard an engine start. The car then sped off. Yesterday morning, I went into work. Halfway through my journey, I saw a black car in my rearview mirror. I couldn't tell if it was the same one, but it definitely seemed to be following me. I decided to check. I made 4 immediate right turns. It mirrored my every move, until the last turn. The driver must have realised what I was doing and turned off, just before I made it. I parked slightly away from the office, just so it wasn't obvious where I was. Silly looking back, really. If this was the government, they would know exactly where I was located and worked. I went into various meetings throughout the day as normal. As it neared 3 o'clock, I had a knock at my office door. It was the receptionist, Kelly. She asked to come in, as something weird had happened earlier in the day. She explained how 2 tall men, both dressed in black suits and wearing fedora-style hats, had come into the office. They were insisting to speak with me and were prepared to wait. Kelly told them that I was out in meetings for the rest of the day. She described getting a strange, unnerving feeling about them. The most peculiar part was that they looked like identical twins. I thanked her. She had done the right thing. I looked back at the security camera footage. I could indeed see 2 men walk in. They spoke with Kelly and left within the space of 10 to 15 minutes. They were tall, bold, and had similar, if not the same features as one another. My mouth went dry as it suddenly dawned on me that whoever was running that underground hellhole knew my identity. I left early complaining of a headache and went back home. As I pulled down my street, I saw the black car once again. This time it drove straight past. The 2 men inside stared intently at me. Time seemed to slow as their gaze followed me until I had passed them. I rushed out of the car and through my front door. Something felt off. I walked through to the dining room. On the table, I noticed a small envelope placed in the centre. My paranoia was now really getting to me. Had they been in my house? What did they want with me? Deep down, I knew the answers, and they were all confirmed once I opened it. Inside, 6 photos, all of me. They were taken within the cave system. I felt sick. Surely whoever was behind this would not let me live, knowing what I had seen. I didn't go into the office today, as I feared for my safety. I stayed glued to my chair all day, staring at the photos, trying to figure a way out of this mess. The evening had started to set in. Headlights streamed through my window. The black car was back. It parked directly outside my house, and 2 doors began to open. The unsettling men walked expressionless towards my front door. I watched in terror through my blinds in anticipation. 3 large bangs rattled on the door. Now we are all caught up. Here I am, in this messed up situation. I still haven't answered the door. How could I? It has all just gone quiet. Too quiet. I'm currently barricading the doors. I am optimistic about my chances of survival through the night. If I do make it, I will try to get you all some more answers. Hopefully the blurry photo I took down there will be enough proof for someone to believe me. If you do not hear